Everett Holt sat by the small pool in his backyard, gazing out at his wife Lyra and their best friend Matt playing in the surf of the Gulf of Mexico. In the past, these moments filled him with pride. He had always loved watching them laugh and play in the water, which had become a symbol of their shared dream coming true. They had escaped the cold, gloomy winters of their northern hometown. They'd made a life for themselves under the warm Florida sun. This was their slice of paradise. But today, he wasn't thinking about how far they'd come. His mind was stuck on the rumors and whispers that had followed them all the way back from high school. They'd never truly died out. As he watched Matt and Lyra play in the waves, his gut twisted with unease. His surroundings, once the source of joy, faded into the background. What mattered now was what was happening right in front of him. The unsettling reality was taking shape in the sand and surf. Up until last week, Everett could have sworn he loved Matt and Lyra more than anyone else in the world. For years, he had trusted them with everything. His heart, his happiness, even his soul. They had been inseparable. They were like pieces of a puzzle. When one of them was hurting, they all were. When one of them was happy, they all shared in it. Now, though, that trust was crumbling. It felt misplaced, like a foundation built on sand. The three of them had been close since the first day of middle school. They found themselves seated in the same homeroom, and it didn't take long for them to form a bond that carried them through high school. Everett and Matt had been close since middle school. Everett went to college with Matt, who was a bit of a slacker and an aspiring beach bum. He dressed like a surfer and talked like a drug culture expert. Everett never saw him touch hard drugs, but Matt had been well acquainted with weed and alcohol for as long as Everett could remember. Women, for reasons Everett could never fully understand, and were drawn to him like moths to a flame. He was handsome, tanned, and seemed to know just the right things to say. Matt could have had almost any woman he wanted, and it often seemed like he did. Everett used to believe Matt had drawn the line at Lyra out of respect for their friendship, but now he wasn't so sure. After high school, the trio had applied to colleges together, determined to stay close. The only requirement for their choice was that it had to be in Florida. Reputation and academic programs were secondary to the promise of warm weather and sandy beaches. They were all accepted into the same college and naturally moved in together. It only took Matt dropped out after just one semester, deciding that college wasn't for him. He ended up moving to the beaches around Fort Myers, living hand to mouth while Everett and Lyra continued their studies. They still saw each other on weekends and summers, and their friendship seemed as strong as ever. While Matt was working part-time jobs to make ends meet, Everett and Lyra were busy pursuing their degrees. He worked in a bunch of different places, all of them related to the beach. He worked for a pool company at times, sometimes in beachside. He also worked for a few businesses there. Eventually, he found his niche at a beach rental shop. He was really good at selling. He could talk tourists into renting anything, even things they didn't need. Everett figured it was his laid-back attitude. After graduating, Everett and Lyra quickly found jobs. Lyra landed a position at a beachside boutique, rising swiftly to become assistant manager. Everett took a job at the equipment rental outlet where Matt worked. He moved up fast, becoming the store manager and second in command to the owner. The three of them remained close as ever, working within half a mile of each other. Everett, Lyra, and Matt were all working at the same company, just half a mile apart. They crossed paths a lot, and Matt often mentioned that he and Lyra had lunch together or spent their breaks hanging out. Rumors started up again that there was something more between Matt and Lyra, but Everett brushed them off, as he always had. They were old friends, so why wouldn't they spend time together? Lyra had already dated Matt back in their younger years and found him unsuitable as a life partner. She had chosen Everett, he was the one she married. Aside from women on the beach, there was one thing Matt loved above all else: cars. His passion for iconic cars ran deep. Whenever a conversation veered in that direction, he was all in. Matt was always talking about cars, especially his favorite, the Dodge Charger. His first car was a Charger, and so were all his cars since. After years of saving up, Matt finally got his hands on something special. It wasn't just any Charger, it was a Dodge Challenger SRT Hellcat, gleaming in plum crazy purple with black accents. When he wasn't chasing women or lounging by the beach, he was polishing, babying, and upgrading that Hellcat. His true love, LRA, was the first to ride in the new car and has seen it many times afterward. He's cruised around with Matt in the passenger seat, remembering the good days, the road trips, camping trips, and lazy afternoons. LRA has always been there for both of them, but she was. Everett had been told by LRA that she and Matt were just friends. But now, as he reflected on the past, he realized that she had probably been more than just a friend. She had never admitted to being a friend with benefits, but that seemed to be what she was. It was only in the past week that the truth had finally hit him. Lara's disrespect and infidelity proved those rumors that had haunted him for years were true. Everett had almost regretted volunteering to deliver the scaffolding on the day his world came crashing down. He had been bored, and the client had insisted the scaffolding was urgently needed. Everett told his boss he'd make the delivery, but he could have easily stayed home. He stayed out of the loop for a while longer, but things took a turn. His stomach churned with anger as he thought back to that day. It had been a typical Tuesday, clear skies, sunshine, slow business. Then the call for the scaffolding came in. Everett told Mr. Kern he'd handle it himself, saving the driver from having to work late. It was a win-win. If Everett won, the client would be happy and he'd get to leave the store for a bit, but that quick decision led to his downfall on the way back to the store. He took the beach road, passing by Ira's and Matt's workplaces. As he neared the small rundown building where Matt worked, he saw something that made his stomach churn. Lyra was meeting Matt outside with a heated kiss. Matt's hands slipped under her loose blouse, groping her breasts for a moment. Before he could stop her, she led him inside. As they walked through the door, his hand slid under her skirt, and she turned toward him with a giggle. She bent slightly at the waist, grabbed his arm, and they backed into the store, smiling all the while. The door closed behind them, and she pulled Matt in for another long, hungry kiss. This time, it was clear that Lyra was taking the lead. Matt quickly flipped the sign to close for lunch and followed Lyra. She led him deeper into the building, laughing. He followed, pulling her hand through his. He was furious. He drove his new Ram 1500 Rebel into the parking lot beside Matt's Hellcat and almost sprinted toward the building. The door was locked, the lights off, and no one was in sight. They had to be in the stockroom. Without thinking, Everett crept around the side of the building, dragging a garbage can beneath a high, grimy window. He pulled himself up just enough to see inside. He looked inside and saw that it was dark, but he could hear voices. He jumped down, stacked a couple of pallets on top of the garbage can, and climbed back up. This time he had a better view, and what he saw made him feel sick. He saw Lyra and Matt, leaning against a stack of boxes. Her clothes were a mess, and it was clear that Matt was close to her. They were moving together, and the air was thick with a shared intensity. Everett could hear her voice, a soft murmur that seemed like a sigh. It was an intimate exchange that struck him like a lightning bolt. His hands were shaking, and he took out his phone to take pictures. He then climbed down, his mind spinning with rage and disbelief. He felt he was utterly lost, like everything he had known had been ripped away from him in a matter of moments. His perfect life had been obliterated in the span of a single horrifying afternoon. When Everett returned to work, Mr. Kern knew something was wrong, but Everett refused to discuss it. He could only manage to say, "I just realized that things aren't always what they seem. Something I thought I knew turned out to be a lie, and now I've got to rethink everything." Everett snapped out of his daydream, pulled back to the present by the sight of his wife Ira and his former best friend Matt laughing and wrestling in the surf. His heart clenched as Ira's joyful screams and giggles echoed in his ears, accompanied by Matt's booming laughter. They looked so carefree and relaxed. The scene would have seemed innocent if Everett hadn't already learned the truth. As he watched them, plans formed and crumbled in his mind one after the other. The other one, though, he kept thinking about and plotting, but nothing stuck. His gaze wandered around their backyard, taking in the house and the pool. He was going to miss this place, maybe even more than he'd missed Moss, perhaps almost as much as he had missed LRA. At least they hadn't bought the house outright, just to own it. That small mercy meant walking away, and it would sting a little less. Lost in his thoughts, Everett didn't realize he'd emerged from the surf until she was running toward him, still holding Matt's hand. Her face glowed with happiness, the same flirtatious energy that had drawn him in years ago. Everett thought back to when they were engaged and married. He recalled her bubbly personality, her constant cheerfulness, and her affectionate nature. He wondered if he should have questioned that warmth when she directed it at others. He had brushed it off, convinced it was just who she was. It was just who she was until now. Now he saw it for what it really was, a flirtatious cheat. As LRA came closer, she let go of Matt's hand, still catching her breath from their swim. "Why the gloomy face?" she asked, panting slightly. "It's a gorgeous day and we're all together. What's got you so down?" He leaned in for a kiss, but Everett turned his face slightly, letting her lips brush against the side of his. "Nothing you don't already know," he replied, forcing a tight smile. "I'm just thinking about last week. Some issues came up at work, but I'll figure it out soon enough. Why are you in such a good mood this afternoon?" LRA's smile faltered just a little as she glanced over at Matt. Everett recognized that look, though it held a different meaning. Now it wasn't just friendship behind her eyes, it was something more. "We've had a great swim, Matt and I," she began. "Now we're ready for a good meal and some time to relax. What are you planning to cook for us tonight?" "Oh, so I'm the designated cook again." Everett chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "It seems like I'm always the one cooking, even when we're at Matt's place. Doesn't seem fair, does it?" He shook his head. "LRA, I didn't really think about it. I've been busy with that work problem, you know? Maybe you and Matt can figure something out, or we could just make sandwiches." LRA's eyes sparkled as she grabbed Matt's hand again. "One of the best parts is watching you cook while the sun sets, then sitting down together to enjoy it. I can't believe you let that slip today." She giggled and then turned toward Matt. "I know what we can do. You can chill some wine and set the table, and Matt can take me for a spin in his Dodge. We'll get takeout from that new restaurant downtown and eat out here on the patio. No need to wait for a response." LRA went inside to change into a sundress and sandals. When she returned, she was all smiles again. "Let's go, Matt." She tugged toward the front door. Front door, eyes gleaming with excitement. As she turned back toward Everett, she said, "We'll probably be gone for about an hour and a half. I've got to give them time to get the food ready. I'll call when we're on our way back." With that, she and Matt slipped out the door. Moments later, the rumble of the Hellcat's engine filled the air, followed by the screech of tires. Everett stood frozen, the front door still swaying slightly in its frame. This had happened before plenty of times, but now it felt different. It was brazen, or maybe he was just seeing it for what it really was. They'd been pulling stunts like this since middle school, always finding reasons to run errands together, leaving Everett behind. He'd never thought much of it. Sometimes he and Ira would run off and leave Matt alone too. Back then it was just innocent fun, but now Everett wasn't so sure. He let out a sigh and went back outside to the patio, slumping back into his chair. He brought his glass from the bottle of Bourbon with him and poured another drink. He didn't bother chilling the wine or setting the table. He didn't even move. He just sat there, drinking, and feeling numb to everything except the slow burn of alcohol in his veins. When Lyra and Matt finally returned, she was laughing as they walked through the front door, their footsteps loud as they clumped through the house and burst into the kitchen. Lyra emerged onto the patio, where Everett's laughter abruptly stopped when she saw the still untouched table. "What on earth have you been doing? I thought you were going to chill some wine and set the table while we were gone. It doesn't look like you've moved at all." What's wrong with you today? Hurry up and get the table ready. We're starving. Everett looked at her, sadness clouding his eyes. Her appearance said everything he needed to know. Her hair was tousled, her lips swollen and red, and her nipples were visible through the thin fabric of her top. She wasn't wearing a bra anymore. He was certain she had been when they left. Somehow, LRA seemed oblivious to his expression. He only had his own plate and silverware, so he served himself from the takeout containers and sat down already eating. By the time Ira stormed inside to fetch plates for herself and Matt, he was already eating. When she came back out, she grumbled and rumbled under her breath, berating Everett once again for not setting the table. "I'm tired, Everett," she replied simply, not looking up. "You could have easily grabbed your own plates and silverware. It wouldn't have taken much effort." Matt finally spoke up. His voice was heavy with frustration. "Dude, this is messed up. Why are you acting like this? We went to get some great food, and now you're acting like a jerk, man. You've got an amazing woman, and you're treating her like this. We're brothers. You've got to have my back." Everett's eyes darkened as he stared at his plate. His silence was heavier than words. Everett locked eyes with Matt. His anger was rising in waves. He then shot a glance at Ira, who looked down at her plate, avoiding the tension between the two men and focusing back on Matt. Everett said, "You know what, Matt? I'm not sure how this became any of your business. This is my house, and what I do here is up to me. You've gotten used to me footing the bill." Everett continued, "I'm going to start taking care of myself and Lyra on the weekends, so you're going to have to start pulling your own weight around here, dude." LRA gasped and looked up, eyes wide with surprise. At Everett, he turned to her. His voice was colder. "What's the matter, LRA? You got a problem with that?" "Honey," she hesitated, then stammered, "Well, it's just that Matt doesn't earn enough to cover everything when we hang out. He's barely making it between his car payments and rent. We've always helped each other." Everett narrowed his eyes. "We're adults, Lyra. We all have jobs and we're all responsible for ourselves, right?" She nodded and whispered, "Yes, exactly." Everett said firmly, "So when we're together, we should all pitch in. And when we're not, everyone should pay their own way. It's not like we're in a relationship where we help each other out. When someone's a guest, they at least offer to help out, even if it's not expected. But with us, it's different. No matter where we are, whether it's here or at Matt's place, you two are off having fun while I'm stuck cooking, serving, cleaning up, and paying for everything. This isn't an equal partnership. I'm tired of being in an unequal partnership." The mood turned sour, and the evening quickly descended into an uncomfortable mess of accusations, hurt feelings, and tense silences. Everett wasn't ready to reveal the full extent of why he had taken such a hard stance, but they knew something was eating at him. Over the next 2 weeks, he watched Lyra and Matt like a hawk every time they were together. He saw them kissing, touching, and acting like they couldn't keep their hands off each other twice in 1 week and 3 times the next. Everett snapped even more pictures of them having sex during work hours. It made him sick to his stomach. He and Lyra were having less sex than ever before, even before the affair came to light. It was clear that Matt was getting more than his fair share of what LRA had to offer by the end of the second week. Everett made up his mind on Friday. He marched into his boss's office and told Mr. Huxley, "I've been looking over some numbers, and I think we could significantly boost profits if we shut down the beach rental store and let Matt go." Mr. Huxley raised an eyebrow, looking at Everett. "Matt's your friend, isn't he? Why would you recommend closing his store and firing him?" "I think we should close the store and let Matt go. We could use an extra pair of hands here at the main rental center. Wouldn't that be a better solution than closing the store and letting your friend go?" Everett leaned forward and placed a folder of figures on Mr. Huxley's desk. "I understand where you're coming from, sir, but in this case, keeping Matt on would be a mistake." He opened the folder and pointed to the numbers. First of all, while the beach store performs well during peak tourist season, it barely covers operating costs. The rest of the year, in fact, if we only operated from mid-April to mid-September, we'd capture 89% of its yearly profits. So I suggest we either lease the building or sell it outright. If you decide not to sell, we could close the store during the off-season and just run it for 5 months. I've crunched the numbers for each scenario, and either option would save us money. You could even consider. If we leased the building in September, we'd capture 89% of its yearly profits. If you decide not to sell, we could close the store during the off-season and just run it for 5 months. I've crunched the numbers for each scenario, and either option would save us money. You could even consider it. Selling part of the lot and keeping space for a mobile store to run during the peak season is another option. That way, you're earning from the lease and maximizing profits during the busy months. Selling the property outright would also give us the capital to invest in more equipment or increase our interest income. Everett hesitated for a moment before continuing. He said that he believes Matt's continued employment would be detrimental to the company. He also said that Matt's personal life and poor work habits have already started to interfere with his job. Keeping him on would be a liability. I've also found out that Matt has been closing the store during working hours to have sex with a woman in the stockroom. He's been collecting pay for time he wasn't working, essentially stealing from the business. I've documented 7 occasions in the last 2 weeks where the store was shut down for almost an hour. On top of his regular lunch breaks, Everett took a breath and added that the unauthorized closures have cost the business both in potential sales and rentals. He said that he can't work alongside him any longer. This isn't an ultimatum, but if Matt stays on, he'll be looking for another job. Mr. Huxley's face showed shock. I can't believe this. Matt and Lyra have been friends for years. Everett said bitterly. I thought so too, but I've recently found out things aren't what they seem. Matt's definitely not a friend of mine or Lyra's. I won't be your wife for much longer. Mr. Huxley frowned, giving Everett a long, hard look before opening the envelope. As soon as he pulled out the first photo, his eyes widened, and he sharply inhaled. He flipped through the images quickly, then looked up at Everett. Softer son, I don't even know what to say. I understand why you don't want to work with Matt anymore, and I understand why you're leaving Lyra. But closing the beach rental store? Are you sure that's not just revenge? I knew you'd wonder about that look. I'd be lying if I said this situation didn't affect my thinking. I know it's a tough decision, but from a business standpoint, closing that store makes sense. Any accountant would agree. I suggest we have our accounting firm review my numbers, but I'm confident they'll back me up. The store barely turns a profit over the year, and the money tied up in it could be put to better use elsewhere. My calculations show that the store only adds about $600 a month to your bottom line. If we sold the property or even just rented it out, we'd see much better returns. Mr. Huxley nodded thoughtfully, still flipping through the photos, and said, All right, let's have the accountants take a look. As it turned out, the firm was even harsher in its assessment than ever before. They determined that the store was actually running at a loss outside of peak tourist season. In the end, Mr. Huxley agreed with Everett's recommendation. The store was closed, and Matt was fired. That same day, Matt was fired. He had instructed his lawyer to serve Lyra with divorce papers, so he spent the morning moving out of the rented house and into a small apartment within walking distance of work. He settled back into the routine at the rental center, and his phone rang. It was Lyra. He debated answering. He knew the conversation wouldn't be pleasant, but he picked up the phone anyway. Hello, Lyra, he said. What do you want? He was surprised at her calm tone. Did you know about all this? Why didn't you tell us that Mr. Huxley was going to close the store and fire Matt? We were friends, so I'm surprised you didn't try to convince him to move Matt to the store you work in. He was already behind on rent and car payments, and now he's got no way to catch up. I told him he could move in with us until he gets back on his feet. Can you leave work early and help him move? Everett's jaw clenched. No, Lyra. I won't help him move, and I don't work with Matt because I caught him closing the store during business hours when he wasn't even there. The store wasn't making enough money to stay open, so Mr. Huxley decided to close it. That's the situation now. I've got work to do. He hung up before she could respond. She responded half an hour later when the phone rang again. This time, Everett regretted picking up. Lyra was screaming before he even got a word in. Everett, how could you do this to us? You got Matt fired, didn't you? And now you're divorcing me too? How can you just cut us both out of your life like this? We've all been together for so long. How can you just drop us like we don't matter? Everett's voice was firm. How could I? How could you, Lyra? You cheated on me with Matt. How could you not expect me to get rid of him and you both? You think I'm crazy, but I've seen you and Matt together. I've seen you two being way too close. Crossing lines is not okay in a committed relationship. What do you think led me to believe that? I swear I never let anything happen between me and Matt. Not once. Everett's voice was cold as he replied, Then what exactly do you call what I saw, Lyra? That wasn't being faithful. LRA hesitated. Well, I guess it was something, but I always saw it as just a connection, like what you and I have. We've been together for a long time, and you've known that from the start. Everett, I love you, and I care about Matt too. But you've always been my choice for a husband. You're the one who can provide stability for us. Matt, well, he's different. He brings something unique into our lives. He makes us whole. The three of us were a team. You take care of things. I nurture them. Matt brings something else. Joy and balance. That's always been the way things were, Everett. He shook his head, disbelief clouding his expression. If Matt is so important to you, why did you marry me? Because I was the responsible one. You can provide for us when we have kids and give them the life they need. Matt's not in that place yet, but he's still part of this. He's part of our family. We all work together as a unit. That's what I've always believed. Everett stood there for a moment, anger simmering beneath the surface. No, Lyra, I don't see it that way. I never did. He ended the call abruptly, his hands trembling. How could he have missed this all along? He was furious at her, and at himself for not seeing the truth sooner. It didn't take long for Lyra to invite Matt to move in with her after Everett left. Even then, Matt struggled to pay his bill. 2 months after the separation, he showed up at Everett's work looking desperate. Everett was ready to throw him out. But before he could say anything, Matt blurted out, Dude, I need your help. They're going to take my car. Man, LRA helped me last month, but we're tapped out now. Can you loan me the money to cover it? Everett blinked in disbelief. You show up here after everything that's happened and you have the nerve to ask me for a loan? Get out. I'm going to calm down a bit before I say something I regret. Matt, I know things got weird between us, but I thought you were okay with how things were. We've always been tight, right? I need your help now, and we can figure the rest out later. Maybe I can help you after all. Let's head over to the bank and we'll take care of this. Matt's face lit up with relief. I knew I could count on you, man. Thanks. They headed to the bank that held Matt's car loan, where they sat down with a loan officer after they explained the situation. Everett leaned forward. I understand Matt is behind on his payments. I've agreed to step in and take over the payments to prevent any further issues. The loan officer looked uncertain. I'm not sure if that's something we can do without more details. I just need help with the payments. Everett turned to Matt. Matt, I'm offering to take over the loan and handle everything from here on out. That way, you don't have to worry about the payments anymore. Matt's expression relaxed, and he smiled. Okay, that sounds good. Let's do it. The loan officer gathered everything. After a few minutes, she ran a quick credit check and smiled. I see no issues with you taking over the payments on Mr. Tremont's vehicle. She stood up and went to get some forms. Mr. Holt, I can also help process the new title for you to submit to the state. Get the paperwork when she leaves, Matt said, shifting in his seat. His expression turned serious. Hey, dude, what's this about changing the title to your name? I told you I can't lose my car. Relax, Matt. It's just part of the process since I'm taking over the payments. You know how it is. How the banks and the government work is all about the paperwork. Matt let out a sigh of relief and nodded. Yeah, I don't really get how all that works, he said. I was just worried about my ride. We're good, Matt replied. We'll have it all taken care of within 45 minutes. Matt had signed over the car and Everett had settled the overdue balance as they headed back to Everett's. Matt seemed to revert to his old self, cheerful and carefree. Everett had to keep his frustration in check. When they got back to the store, Matt hopped out and hurried around to the driver's side. He grinned and said, Hey man, I scored some great stuff yesterday. How about we hang out and relax for a bit? Let's celebrate. Everett said, shaking his head. I can't right now. Why not? Matt asked. I need to finish up the paperwork for your car, Everett replied. All right, no problem. Catch you later, dude, Matt said, waving as he drove off. Everett walked into the DMV with a spring in his step, thrilled that everything had gone according to plan. Everything went according to plan. Once the transaction was complete, he couldn't help but smile as he left the building. 2 weeks later, Everett received the final divorce papers in the mail. As divorces go, it was straightforward. He and Lyra had similar incomes, so there were no financial obligations to settle. They each kept their personal belongings. Vehicles and other assets. Everett signed off on the lease for their old beachfront home, feeling a mixture of relief and nostalgia. He didn't miss IRA, but he did miss that house. Late that Saturday night, technically early Sunday morning, Everett decided to pay a quiet visit to his former home. He rode one of the rental beach bikes there. He carefully unlocked the door with the key. It was the same one she'd given him. He smiled as he stepped inside. There on the table were the keys to Matt's Hellcat. He picked them up but hesitated before leaving. Where was the other set? He wondered. He checked the cabinet where she usually kept her purse. And there it was. He found a second set of Hellcat keys attached to her keychain. He pocketed them and quietly slipped back outside. He made his way to the Hellcat in the driveway and opened the door. The car was loud, really loud, and he knew that starting it without drawing attention would be nearly impossible. He turned the key and the engine roared. The engine roared to life, filling the air with a loud, distinctive sound. He backed out of the driveway and headed for his place, planning to return with his truck later to pick up the bike he had left behind the next day after a quiet lunch. Everett's phone rang, and Matt was on the other end, speaking so quickly Everett could barely understand him. I don't understand, Everett. Someone stole my car. I can't believe it. What am I going to do? Everett's tone remained calm and collected. Matt, there's nothing I can do for you. I've listened to your rant for a few more moments, and I've finally hung up. I'm smiling because I'm happy for you. You've landed a part-time job with a pool company. Everett made a point of driving the Hellcat past the business when Matt was getting off work on Thursday. Everett caught a glimpse of Matt's face as he rolled by and gave the horn a quick tap. Matt was getting into Lyra's car, and he looked pretty mad. The Hellcat rumbled down the street, and the engine noise drowned out Matt's angry shouts as Everett disappeared into traffic, leaving the two of them behind. On a Saturday morning, Everett was busy waxing the Hellcat when a city patrol car pulled into the lot behind him. The officer stepped out and approached him. "Are you Everett Holt?" he asked. "Yes, officer, is there a problem?" Everett responded. "Is this your vehicle, sir?" the officer asked, glancing at the Dodge. "Well, yes, it is, although technically it belongs to me in the bank," Everett replied. The officer tensed slightly and continued, "Can I see the registration and proof of insurance, please?" "Proof of insurance, please." "Sure thing," Everett replied, opening the car door and rummaging through the glove compartment. He produced the requested documents as he handed them over. "Is there a problem, officer?" "No, just a few minutes," the officer replied, taking the paperwork and walking back to his patrol car. He returned a few minutes later, handing the documents back to Everett. "Mr. Holt, we received a report from Mr. Masrant stating the VIN he gave us matches this car. He said he saw you driving it and asked us to recover it. But the registration and DMV records show that you own this vehicle. Could you explain the situation?" Everett leaned casually against the car, smiling. "Well, officer, Mr. Trump did own this car at one point, but he couldn't keep up with the payments. So I agreed to take them over to help him out. We went to the bank and I took over the loan and the ownership of the vehicle. I'm not sure what his issue is, but I suspect he might have been confused, whether from stress or something else, when he made the report. We used to be friends, but after my wife and I divorced, he sided with her. We're not as close as we used to be. I even let him keep the car for 2 weeks after the transfer so he could figure out alternative transportation." The officer nodded. "So you're..." "I don't think it's accurate to say that Mr. Tremont is trying to cause trouble because of your divorce. I think he might have forgotten the deal we made." The next afternoon, Everett was relaxing by the pool when he noticed Lyra and Matt storming into view. Before he could stand, they tipped his chair over, dumping. "Sorry to have bothered you. Have a good day. Why'd you take my car? I need a hand over the keys." Matt was pretty mad. Everett just stood up and said, "You came to me asking for help, and I helped you because we used to be friends. You signed the car over to me so it wouldn't be repossessed. Now it's mine, and I'm not complaining. This Hellcat is a sweet ride. It seems fair in the end. You've got your car, and I've got mine. I think I came out ahead, though. At least I don't have to worry about this car leaving me for someone else without my permission." LRA let out a sharp gasp and started crying silently while Matt stared at Everett, dumbfounded. "That's just cold," Matt muttered. Everett looked them both in the eye. "Yeah, it is what it is now. Get out of here before I call the police. I don't want to see either of you again."